Welcome back to my channel. I'm James. Today we're going to be diving into a fantasy, sci-fi, kind of one of those films that I always really enjoyed. It's not my all-time favorite and it's got some hokiness in it, but it is one of those films that kind of is a mishmash of a bunch of genres. So I'm excited to announce we're going to deep dive into Highlander on 4K Ultra HD. Now this is the brand new 4K Ultra HD release from Studio Canal and Lionsgate Home Entertainment. Now this has been released the same transfer and restoration all around the world now. In the US we did get it from Lionsgate and Studio Canal, and it's the same discs that were released everywhere. Now I will tell you, when I went through all of my exclusive testing and analysis on there is some things that will probably surprise you that really haven't been talked about. There's a lot of things I find that gets kind of overlooked or ignored because a lot of people don't do analysis and testing with their reviews like I do. When I sit down and dissect basically what the image and sound quality is and go side by side with my exclusive image comparisons, and that's where I'm going to be comparing this to the original Blu Ray release in my side by side analysis here. There's some things that I think should have been talked about that really aren't, and there's a lot of things that are disappointing that we need to discuss. Now I'm going to give you my review score at the end, which will sum up the quality of this release and the transfer, the special features, and what they did at the end of this review, as I always do. So that'll give you a sum up so you know how this compares to hundreds of other 4Ks I've tested and reviewed, and how the quality of this really stacks up. Because that's something that's lacking a lot of times these days, is it doesn't seem like it's discussed. How does this compare in comparison to other restorations of 4K releases? People just say, hey, I like the release, but that doesn't give you an idea of what's the actual quality of this in comparison to other releases. Just saying you like it doesn't give you a comparison of how does it stack up. That's why I work so hard to test and analyze all of these releases that I've exclusively done here on my YouTube channel. Now, if you haven't done so yet, make sure to go down and give this video a like and a thumbs up for me. Hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. Just like with this release, I do a lot of the exclusive 4K versus Blu-ray image comparisons and a lot of exclusive testing that you're only ever gonna find here on my YouTube channel. So make sure to go down there, give this video a like, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. Now to start off with here, we're going to start off with my original Blu-ray release here. This is the native image as always, without all the artificial things your TV can do to artificially change the color. These are the native images always pulled from the Blu-ray disc and the 4K disc when we get to that here in just a minute. Now on the Blu-ray disc, I want to touch on something right off the bat here. Highlander has always looked very poor and very rough on every single iteration of home video from the beginning. It's one of those films that I just feel like was not either handled properly, handled well, the special effects, the optical shots. There's so many things that are kind of mishmashed together to create this film that it has always just looked extremely rough. So I want to point that out before we get into what I had to talk with about the 4K here, because it's important to understand that from the get-go. Now getting to the 4K Ultra HD release. Highlander, as I mentioned just a second ago, has always looked rough. The new 4K restoration they did is a native 4K 2160p, and it does have Dolby Vision and HDR10 on it, which does add a lot of life and depth to the image on this transfer. So I did appreciate that as you're noticing those images above. But there is a lot of things that just have not been talked about, which are really shocking, which is why I had to make this review with the analysis to make sure that all of you understand about this. Because if you've bought this release, if you've seen this release, you've probably noticed a lot of them and nobody's mentioning anything about them, which is really shocking and surprising. Now we're going to start with the audio mix here first. This does have English DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 and a 2.0 mix on this. And I will say both audio mixes were still very poor and very rough sounding audio mixes. They're both very tinny and flat sounding audio mixes overall. They do not have good range in any shape or form. Overall, they're so inconsistent throughout the entire release that you'll go from one scene where it's clashing of swords, tinny, ting, 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 really loud, to then they're talking and you can barely hear them. You got to turn it up, you turn it down, you turn it up, you turn it down. It's just overall the audio mix is very flat. Now, I am going to point out the Blu-ray release didn't have a great audio mix either. Like I mentioned, it's always been a rough thing from the beginning of the home video iteration of when they first released Highlander all the way through now. It's just rough. It's poor sounding, it's hard to hear in areas, so inconsistent, and just one of those audio mixes it's not pleasant to listen to. Is this an improvement over the previous Blu-ray? Yes. This is an improvement in the audio mix over the previous Blu-ray. But I thought the previous Blu-ray releases were horrible, and I don't want to say unwatchable and like you can't listen to it at all on the Blu-rays, but they were horrible on the Blu-rays before. This is only incrementally better in those areas. Yes, it did help with areas of clarity and things like that. But overall, I mean, you really, in comparison to hundreds of other restorations and things that I've tested and reviewed, when I sit down and I go through all of the audio on all of these releases, this one is just extremely poor, extremely flat. And I mean flat and tinny. It's just not great sounding, and I can't recommend the audio mix on this at all. But like I said, it's always been rough. Now, if after you get done watching this review and hearing my review score, I always post the direct links from Amazon to buy these. So that way, if you want to buy this and add this to your collection, I'll put the direct link from Amazon posted in the description section and as a pinned comment in the comment section below. Never costs you even a penny extra when you click on those links, and it's on sale for the same prices everywhere. But those do help to support this YouTube channel just a little bit, and that's how I'm able to keep creating these videos and creating all this content here on my YouTube channel. So make sure, if you're gonna buy Highlander after you hear my review or any of the reviews that I've done here on my YouTube channel, make sure to click through those Amazon links I've posted in the description section and as a pinned comment in the comment section below. Now this does get English subtitles as well, so you do get that option on it. Now one other thing I did want to touch on about the audio mix on this. It's existed on the Blu-rays before, but I did think it was almost more noticeable because of the increase in details where you could see their mouths more in some scenes. You do notice the audio lag and some slight audio delays that exist on this release. And they've existed on previous Blu-ray releases before, but I felt like they were almost more evident on this because some of those scenes where they were kind of fuzzier or hazy on the previous Blu-ray release, that in those slightly more detailed scenes that you'll notice that fluctuate throughout, which I'll get to about the image here in a minute, but in those scenes where you do notice that, you'll notice sometimes, like even Sean Connery's character, when he would be talking, sometimes the words would be just like his mouth would move and the words would be just a millisecond slightly delayed throughout the entire film. And you'll notice that throughout it, through all of the characters randomly. And it's not so bad that it's every single scene, but if you really are a mouth watcher like I am, where I watch their mouths when they're talking, those were inherently and were worse, almost more noticeable on this than I noticed on the Blu-ray. So in that sense, I didn't feel like that was an upgrade because I noticed those more. Though again, it's always been rough. Now, getting to the visual quality on this. That's where, as you've noticed in those image presentations above, I really feel like they're giving you a slightly false opinion of how good this looks. And here's why. Sometimes it's hard with the way YouTube's algorithm is to show as much of a soft scene in comparison to a Blu-ray, because a 4K automatically has more detail behind it anyways, but it does the best it can, and this is the best presentation to give you an example. But I will tell you, the image on this goes from a soft looking image to a more detailed and incredibly good looking image, back to a soft image, to some scenes that are SD and below SD. There's some optical shots, for example, of like when Connor McLeod is basically fighting and in battle and it goes into where it's coming through his eye and things like that. It's actually like VHS quality for that entire scene. It's actually lower than SD quality. And if you've seen this on 4K Ultra HD or any of the previous Blu-ray releases, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It looks even worse on this 4K Ultra HD, and there's not really anything they can do, because to be honest with you, it's from the original elements that it exists in such a poor quality that there's not anything they can do, I guess, to upscale it or make it look better. So you do notice some of those scenes, there's several of those scenes like optical shots that are just very, very very poor quality, and they stand out like a sore thumb on this 4K Ultra HD release. You literally go from one of those just, man, Highlander's never looked better. You're ringing and shouting to the sky saying this is an amazing release. To the next scene, you're like, holy crap, is that horrible looking? And not meaning to curse you or anything, but man, is that one crappy, horrible looking VHS. You gotta think, man, am I even watching a 4K here scene? And you have a couple of those throughout it that really do stand out. And they actually stand out worse on this than they did on the Blu Ray because of it having some amazingly good looking scenes. But then there's a lot of scenes where there's no noticeable film grain, where it looks like some heavy DNR was applied and used throughout this. And you'll go from like where they're in the park and scenes like that where it'll be showing the Highlands and things like that. All of a sudden it'll look really good with some really good film grain and detail in the image, to literally it goes to the next scene and holy cow, is it smooth and waxy looking and there's no film grain present at all, not even a speckle of film grain, back to a good looking scene. That's where nobody's talking about any of this. It really shocks me. How can people claim they're reviewing and testing and analyzing something and missing out on all of these inherent issues that are on this 4K Ultra HD? It just really is sad and shocking. As a reviewer myself, it really makes me feel like, what are people doing? Are they blind and deaf? And not trying to be rude here. This is really one of those releases that I feel like, wow, what is wrong with people's hearing and eyesight that they're just not seeing all of the inherent problems with this release, and that stand out even worse than they ever have before. And it just really is one of those, I understand Highlander's rough, but there were some things in this that I actually felt like made some of those rough things even worse. Another big thing I noticed as a misnomer and a very disappointing thing in this release was the film grain. As I talked about that it's missing in some scenes and then it goes to nice film grain. Well, on some of those scenes where there is film grain, there is heavy fluctuations. And some of the scenes where they're battling and they're fighting, you'll notice fluctuations, especially in the top right and left-hand corners of your screens, heavy film grain fluctuations and vibrations. And that's where the film grain kind of looks like it's flickering. You'll notice that quite heavily in numerous scenes throughout this release, which isn't being touched on either. So the film grain is not stable throughout the entire release in any shape or form. You know, there's a scene where the bad guy is chasing the girl at the end and she's running through her apartment, and it's kind of like one of those like, oh, scary being chased scenes kind of coming at you like that. And you notice some bad fluctuations with film grain in and out there when he's racing his car through New York and she's screaming before she passes out towards the end of the film. There's bad fluctuations with film grain in that. So you do go through some of those scenes throughout that where it'll go really soft with no film grain, where they used heavy DNR and back and forth. And just overall, the image instabilities were just one of those things that were just not great and really detracted from the enjoyment of this. Now, I will talk on the special effects in this release. Yes, you can still see all of the cables holding up Connor McLeod and all of the characters throughout the film. You still see those evidently clear coming out of their shoulders, and like on the special effects when the signs are falling off, you can see it being pulled down by cables, and those are evidently present and always will be, is my understanding, because this is the best we're ever going to get. Because as I said, it's one of those kind of rougher, in my opinion, it's, you can't take it too seriously, of a sci-fi fantasy romps. And I feel like a lot of modern audiences, if you've never seen Highlander or experienced it, you might have a harder time with it. Here's why. When I watched this again, it's been a few years since I've experienced it on Blu Ray, so I decided let's watch this, go into it with fresh eyes, have my wife watch it, and it's a very kind of one of those things that I don't think it holds up as well as I remembered. Do I still enjoy it? Yes, and it's got charm to it. It's got some good acting in it with some kind of like, I don't know, comical acting in it that you just got to take it for what it is. But it's one of those that I feel like a lot of modern audiences aren't going to understand, aren't going to like, aren't going to think it's well done, because there is some wooden acting in it. There's some bad script choices, some bad plotting. But for a film that came out in 1986, for me it has charms, which is why I've always liked it and enjoyed it. I'm just trying to give an example for those of you that might be going into this thinking, hey, this is a top tier reference quality release. Man, everybody talks about Highlander being a cult classic. I gotta experience this. It's an amazing movie. Even the fights don't hold up as well as I remembered them. Now, maybe it's because it's on 4K. I noticed more things, like the cables were more noticeable, and I noticed a lot of the times that their swords never actually touched each other when they were fighting, and you'd hear the sound effect, and maybe I'm ruining that for you now, but on the Blu-ray, I never noticed it because it was more hazy, maybe. On this, I did notice it more, where some of the times their swords never actually touched each other, and they go ting, but they were still like, 6 inches to a foot apart, and I don't know. It's little things like that maybe I'm just being extra picky on this release because of all the issues I experienced when I was doing all my testing and analysis on this. But I know that's what a lot of you want, is to hear the honest truth, and I will always be upfront and honest with all of you. And I'm going to share with you all of the things I noticed that are wrong and inherent in a release, because I feel like as a reviewer and a trusted reviewer that all of you trust, I need to always be upfront and honest with you, as I always have, and explain to you what I saw, what I experienced, what I heard, and what really wasn't as great as what is being made out to be about this release. And that's where, yes, it is an improvement over the Blu-ray, but some of those improvements actually make it worse looking because you notice more of those things. And so that's where I said it's kind of one of those things you have to take that into consideration. Now, I will touch on the price of this. The price of this is great. I mean, honestly, you can buy it for right around 13 bucks, I think is what it's going for right now. Now that fluctuates. It's been about 15, 14, 13, 12, all around there, which is still a great price. And it's a budget release. So they're not asking for this release in the US for like 30 to 50 bucks. Now I do know the one in the UK that came with all the extra swag was super expensive. I would never have spent that money for it, to be honest with you, because of how disappointed I was in this. But for the price of what this is, if you do like Highlander, it does look better than the Blu-ray, but you'll understand when I get to my review score what I mean by that. But as far as that goes, for $12, $13, okay in that sense, I guess. Now I will show you what you get in this. I do like this embossed slipcover. I thought the slipcover was awesome on this. It says there can only be one. You do get your 4K, your Blu-ray, and your digital copy code, which is your 4K digital. Side of the slipcover, it does say Highlander. Talks about all the brand new restoration and all the special features. It has a ton of archival special features, new special features that Studio Canal did. Literally every special feature you could ever want about Highlander is included in this, so I thought that was a nice thing. That is a huge bonus for this over the Blu-ray. All of these special features and newly commissioned special features were really an outstanding thing. So in that sense, that makes it nice to get all of that on this for such a budget price. And then I do like how it talks about it here, that it now is in electrifying 4K. Though, electrifying. Now, when you get inside here, you do get some really nice cards with it, which I did think that was a nice little touch. I'll show you these here in just a second. You do get your Blu-ray disc, and you do get your 4K Ultra HD disc. Your 4K Ultra HD disc is 100% region-free, and it's on a BD100. Though your Blu-ray disc is on a BD50, and it is region A locked. So for those of you that don't want to spend in the UK for that really expensive set from Studio Canal, and you want the more budget version of this, your Blu-ray is region A locked, but your 4K is region free. So in that sense, that's kind of your trade-off. Now you do get 4 like bonus art cards that I liked with the original poster on them. So I did think that was a nice touch that they did add these, that basically Studio Canal and Lionsgate gave us a little extra swag in it, even for a budget release. That was a nice little touch that I did like. Now, like I was touching on with the audio mix, both audio mixes I felt like could have used a lot more work on them. The instabilities, the tinniness, the overall flat sound of them, I felt like could have used a better restoration and a whole lot more work on them. I don't know, just not as impressive, and I was slightly just disappointed in the release because I was really expecting and excited to get so much more for this because, like I said, it is one of those films that kind of holds a special place with how many times I've seen it and things like that. Now, for those of you that haven't seen this, it is rated R for strong violence, it has some language, and there's a brief scene of sexual content towards the end of the film. It is easily skippable if you want to skip it. It's easy to look it up. It's towards the end of the film. You do know it's coming, but I just thought that I'd point that out as well. The rest of the film, the violence and things like that, I mean, for a 1986 film, it is pretty tame. It's not over the top or too gratuitous in any shape or form. Though I will say, you will kind of notice if you've never seen this film before, there are some kind of hokier scenes that add and lend to the film, in my opinion's kind of charm over the years. But those are things that I find charming in films from back then. But a more modern audience, some of them just kind of think that they're hokey and don't like them. So that's why I wanted to point it out in case you've never seen this film. Now, due to all the inconsistencies and issues I had with the image throughout this as well, it's just not one of those top tier releases. The image inconsistencies did disappoint me. I expected it to be leaps and bounds above the Blu Ray to where it just made the Blu Ray seem like the worst thing ever released. Yes, it looks better. And if you're a huge fan of this film, you're probably thinking, man, I'm a huge fan of this film. It's the best Highlander's ever looked. Yes, it's the best Highlander's ever looked in some areas. Some areas I think it accentuated the bad side worse. But again, it's not a top tier reference quality release. And that's where, as an honest, upfront reviewer with all of you, I have to give you the honest analysis through all of my testing on this. Now, this is in comparison to hundreds of other 4Ks I've tested and reviewed, as I've said before. So when I give you my review score here, remember, this is so you understand how this has quality in comparison audio and visual to all of those other 4K restorations and releases that I've reviewed. So for this release of Highlander on 4K Ultra HD, it gets a slightly disappointing 7.3. Due to all of those issues, inconsistencies, audio, and I could go on for a long time. And I made a list and had to actually cut that down when I get to the cutting floor of cutting down this video, because I had so many things that I noticed throughout it, little nitpicky things that kind of just kept adding up and adding up, that I had to condense it down because there was a lot of things that I noticed throughout it that just really lended to that 7.3, and that's the most I could honestly give it for the quality of this release throughout the entire thing. I do not like DNR, the fact that it was used randomly throughout the film, quite consistently throughout random different scenes, and then good scenes looked really good. I mean, there is some scenes, and if you're a viewer that only shows those good scenes and, hey, look, it's an amazing, look at this screenshot, you're doing a disservice and an injustice to everybody that wants to know what the quality of this release is, because when they find out and they see for themselves those really poor VHS quality scenes, and then they see those really soft scenes and then go to detailed scenes, and really fuzzy scenes that go to detailed scenes, and back and forth, the inconsistencies and fluctuations with the film grain and the flashing and the flickering and the bad mix for the sound and all the issues with that, and then obviously the lags and all of that, they're going to be really upset and disappointed. And that is why I'm always going to be upfront and honest with all of you. Even though I like Highlander and I was really enjoying the fact that this was going to be released on 4K, it doesn't mean that I can ignore or disregard with my love of a film, which I've talked about as a reviewer. Just because I like or love a film, I always have to go from this from an objective standpoint, looking at the quality of the sound and the image and all of that to give you what the review score is, without my love of a film tainting or changing that to make it sound a whole lot better. That is why I've always been picky for all of you, and I'm very careful when I go through doing these analysis and reviews, so that way I can share so you understand where this falls in comparison to those other 4K releases. Truly is a 7.3 and slightly disappointing. But again, Highlander's always looked rough, so it's still an upgrade. But for the Blu-rays, those would have been really bad review scores anyway. So again, it's a slight upgrade in different areas. Just go into it understanding that, and if you love the film, you'll enjoy it on 4K for the budget release it is. And that's a good price point they released it at. They didn't release it at 20, 30, 40 bucks in the US, and I appreciate that because I think they knew kind of the quality of it, and they saw it for themselves, Lionsgate did. Now, maybe Studio Canal thinks it's worth a whole lot more, which is why in the UK they charge so much more for it at an exorbitant price for what you're actually getting on this restoration. But that's a whole nother story and a whole nother subject I'm not going to get into. But I did just want to talk about as far as this goes. It was one of those that I was disappointed when I started hearing, seeing, and reading some of the horrible things that were just lacking in reviews and nobody was talking about. I thought it was important to give you this honest and upfront analysis so you understand how this really looks when you're watching it and you notice those and you think, man, why did nobody mention any of these different issues? Now I did. I covered it for you so you know honestly why those are there, and they're probably never going to be fixed because I honestly think it would take millions and millions of dollars to fix a lot of those because they're inherent to a lot of the problems with Highlander and the original film elements. But it doesn't mean that we got to ignore it on the release and say, hey, it's an amazing release, because in comparison to other ones, a lot of people aren't going to understand that. They're not going to know that it could be inherent to the film elements. So they're going to think, hey, this is an amazing release. Everybody's saying go buy it. It's top tier. It's one of those amazing restorations. They're going to watch it and think, what? Highlander? This doesn't look that great. What are reviewers talking about? That's why I've got to be honest and tell you, it's just not. It's a good movie that's a fun kind of sci-fi fantasy with some hokey elements in it that has some good 80s charm for it. A great soundtrack that's kind of one of those rock Queen soundtracks that really just lends to it. I love the sayings, there can only be one, even though that's not really true, which kind of adds to the hokey thing. But there's not only one, there's like 7, 8, 9, 10, and it goes on and on. But fact of it is it has some cool elements behind it that I like. I'm glad I have it on 4K. It's just one of those that did disappoint me. It's, like I said, slightly better than the Blu Ray when you add everything together. If you take one scene that's one of these, oh, look, it's an outstanding restoration. Look how good this one scene looks. Yes, there is some amazing scenes that do look amazingly good on this. But you can't ignore all of the rest of the issues that are present on this release and have always been present on Highlander. You can't exclude those because there was a few really good scenes throughout it that flashed back and forth between a lot of bad scenes and bad quality. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from this and you really appreciate and understand why I wanted to give you this analysis and review so you understand the quality of this. It is a 7.3. Make sure to start that conversation in the comment section below. Let me know if you've either seen this yet, if you've been able to get a copy of it, what your thoughts are on Highlander altogether, if you've seen the film or not, if you kind of like the hokey elements I talked about. Make sure to start that conversation down there in the comment section below. I always love to hear from all of you. As always, if you enjoy all this time and hard work I put into every single one of these analysis and reviews, just like with this honest and upfront review with all of you, make sure to join my Collectors VIP Club. That is the best way possible to support my YouTube channel and the creation of every single one of these videos. It only costs you a couple of dollars each month, less than the price of a cup of coffee, but that drastically helps in the creation of these videos and helps me to keep creating these videos through all of your support. I'm not sponsored and I'm not paid by anybody. I'm only able to keep doing this through all of you, my viewers and subscribers' support. So make sure to join my Collectors VIP Club or give a super thanks to the super thanks button right below this video. Every single dollar truly does make a difference and helps out in the creation of these videos. Also, if you do decide you're going to buy Highlander or any of the releases I've reviewed here on my YouTube channel, make sure to go down to the links I've posted in the description section and as a pinned comment in the comment section below. I always make it nice and easy for all of you, and those never cost you even a penny extra when you click on those links, but it does help to support the creation of these videos just a tiny bit. So make sure to click on those links down below. Don't forget to give this video a like and a thumbs up for me. Hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. As always, I hope all of you really appreciate and enjoy my honesty and upfrontness with all of you. I hope all of you really have a great, happy holidays and a blessed time with your friends and family. And I always have something new and very exciting coming out very soon.